Welcome back, everyone. We have a big topic today. We're going to be attempting to make a video on the AR-15 buyer's guide, and this video request has come from the viewers over at Mug Club. So for those who don't know, Mug Club is a place where we create exclusive content for members only, and that has been my #1 request over there, is to create this video. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in a way that hopefully helps people who don't know anything about AR-15s, but also helps folks who know things about AR-15s, and it'll hopefully refine your knowledge of it and understanding of the system. And basically, if you guys are interested in Mug Club, at the exclusive content over there, code Mr. Guns and Gear will get you guys a free month trial over there at the website here on your screen. And there's other folks over there like Steven Crowder, Nick DiPaolo, Brian Callen. Other folks are coming on board as well that I don't think I can mention yet, with, again, exclusive content. For example, after this video that you guys are watching on YouTube and Rumble, over there on Mug Club, we're going to do specific recommendations with direct links to buy them at the cheapest prices I know of, which of course we can't do on YouTube because it violates their rules. So that's the beauty of being over there without the rules and without the shackles. So again, if you guys are interested in that, definitely check it out. So again, we're going to be talking about the specs that are really important, the features that are really important on an AR-15, and again, trying to keep it consumable. Each one of these topics that I'm going to delve into could be an hour-long video. So I'm going to kind of hit the high-level stuff. If you guys are watching on YouTube, I have an AR-15 playlist that should help out with way more details. But we'll talk about, again, just your basic AR-15, which is what we have here. This is a Colt 6920. It's very similar to what many of you guys who are veterans were issued. This is basically the civilian version of the M4 carbine, which is the evolution of the M16, which of course is the military's version of the AR-15. It's kind of a lot to digest already. But anyway, most of you guys who served in the military were issued something like this, which, depending on when you served, turned into something like this. This is essentially the same base rifle. This is the M4 carbine. This is the M4A1. And unless you're a Marine, again, you probably, if you served in the last 20 years, maybe even 30 years, were issued something that looks very similar to one of these two rifles. These rifles are mil-spec, and we will get into mil-spec a little bit in this video. But this video is not going to be selecting the best military rifle. It's going to be selecting the best AR-15 for you. So with that said, the first thing we have to discuss is, why do you want it, right? So what's the purpose? Is it going to be for competition? Is it going to be for hunting? Is it going to be for home defense? And I would say the most common thing I get when I read viewer comments is that for folks who don't already have like 10 AR-15s, if somebody's looking to get the first one, is that they want it just in case, which I totally get. If you guys have lived in America over the last 3 years or longer, I get just in case. I think we all do at this point. So with that, we're going to talk about sort of a general purpose rifle is where we're going to be oriented for this video. Additionally, since as of right now, hiccups. But as of right now, there is a brace rule that's going into effect shortly. We're just going to talk about 16-inch and longer guns. That is also because that's 98% of the AR-15s that are on the market anyway, and that is what most folks want because it's just the easiest from a legal perspective in America, and also gives you some benefits as well, which we'll talk about. So with that, first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the operating system. So direct impingement versus piston as the first thing we want to discuss. So on the whole, the biggest pros of a direct impingement system, and what that means is that when the bullet goes down the barrel here, this is our gas block on this particular rifle. They're all a little bit different. The gas is going to go through a little port in the barrel, which is a little hole, go up in there, come through this little tube, and go back in there, and the gas will go directly into our bolt carrier group. We'll get into all this terminology here in a second. Stay with me. And that's what causes the cycle of operations. A piston gun does something very, very similar, but instead of having a gas tube here, it has a piston rod in there, and the gas comes up through here, hits the piston then drives the bolt carrier group and it cycles that way. So those are by far and away the two most popular ways AR-15s function. I would say, if I had to make an educated guess, about 90 to 95% in America. This is not true in other countries. In America, 90 to 95% operate on a direct impingement system, which is what almost all but one of the rifles I have out here today operate on. And the benefits of that is that it's definitely lighter weight. The recoil impulse is, generally speaking, a little bit smoother, meaning that follow-up shots are faster, and just the perceived recoil is everything else being equal, which it never is, but everything else being equal, it's just a little bit smoother and a little bit less harsh recoil. So newer shooters tend to prefer that over the piston systems. The biggest advantage of the piston systems that people will tell you is that back here in your bolt carrier group, which again, we'll get into terms here in a second, show you guys what I'm talking about. It stays a little bit cleaner and runs a little bit cooler. So pros and cons to each for sure. That said, for a general purpose gun, if we're talking about here in America in 2023 and beyond, I would recommend getting a direct impingement rifle. For the vast majority of you, almost none of you are going to need the pros of the piston system versus the DI system. And of course, the black helicopters are going by, but we're going to keep going regardless. So after we decide what kind of system, the gas system or the operating system, that we're going to go over, next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the barrel and the bolt carrier group. On an AR-15, I have to stop. That helicopter is getting way too loud. Hopefully the helicopter's moved off beyond what my microphone can pick up. So getting back into that, the most important components on an AR-15 are going to be your barrel and your bolt carrier group. So selecting our barrel first, for most folks, like I was talking about, we're gonna go with a 16-inch barrel because it's legal in all 50 states. There's variants on that, check your state laws, but 16-inch barrel rifles are legal in all 50 states. So in terms of what are we looking for? Well, again, for a general purpose AR-15, we're talking about 5.56 chambering. Now, a 223 wild chambering is becoming more and more popular every year. And basically, super high level overview, the difference between a 5.56 chamber and a 223 wild chamber. Both can use both 223 Remington ammunition chambered as well as 5.56 chambered ammunition, or marked ammunition. Both use both, so you don't have to worry about that. The 223 Wild has a little bit tighter tolerances that, in theory, everything else being equal, which it never is, can give you a little bit more accuracy. That said, either one works fine. For a general purpose rifle, either one is fine. So 5.56, 223 Wild, fine. So 16-inch, the materials that we're going to talk about are going to, generally speaking, be one of 4 or 5 different types. So what we have here in terms of a mil-spec rifle is going to be a chrome-lined 4150 or some variant of that. So 4150 just means the type of steel, and that is a type of steel that is considered mil-spec. This one here is chrome-lined, and what that means is that in the bore of the barrel and the inside, if you look in there, you will actually see the chrome. And companies use chrome lining for a number of different reasons. One of them is going to be corrosion resistance. It's very hard for chrome to rust. It's very hard, and additionally, it wears very slowly. So these things get very hot, and when you fire them a lot, it can erode the actual rifling that's inside the barrel, and chrome helps prevent that. There's other ways that help prevent that as well. And then these particular mil-spec barrels like this are going to be magnetic particle inspected, or MP tested, as well as proof tested, or HP tested. So what that means is magnetic particle inspection means that they just hit it with, a simple overview is that they hit it with electricity to see if there's any hairline fractures that you can't detect with your human eye, to see if there's any imperfections or weak spots in the barrel that are going to cause it to fail early. And then the HP, or the proof testing, which will come up later in the video as well, is going to be, they fire a high pressure round through it. So generally speaking, the AR-15 operating pressure in the chamber is going to be somewhere 55 to 60,000 PSI in terms of chamber pressure. They fire one that's much higher than that, so that way it stresses the barrel in a way that would be abnormal under normal firing circumstances, and they do that to ensure that the steel, again, and all the manufacturing processes can handle it, and that they can handle a lot more than what you're going to throw at it. So that's what those two things mean, and that is mil-spec. So mil-spec is a version of 4150 steel, chrome-lined, MP, HP tested. Now there are other very good processes as well that we will talk about. So first off, as I look at this one here, this is, like I said, this is a Colt 6920, so it's the civilian version of the military's M4. Military's M4 is going to be 14.5 inches long and uses a carbine length gas system. So I guess we're jumping ahead, but we will get back into barrel materials here in a second. So with this carbine length gas system, basically it's about 7 inches forward, and that will cause, on a 16-inch barrel, it will cause the action to cycle faster than it would with a 14.5-inch barrel, because basically it's putting the gases back in there with more force because it has more time here in the barrel as the bullet goes through it. So what I would say for a civilian rifle, for you guys looking at home, is that I wouldn't recommend a carbine system if you're going to have a 16-inch barrel. I recommend a mid-length system. Mid-length system, again, all things being equal, which they never are, a little bit softer recoiling. The actual action, the cycling of the rifle is going to be slower. That's going to cause less wear on the parts. It's also going to cause less perceived recoil, and it's also going to help with reliability long term. So I do not recommend the carbine system, but that is what this has due to being a military clone rifle. Additionally, getting back to barrel materials, other options that you will see out there are going to be stainless steel barrels. So like we have here, this is a stainless steel barrel. It is 416R stainless steel. If you're going to get a stainless steel barrel, the ones I recommend are 416R in terms of material, or 410 stainless steel. You will see 416 without the R barrels out there. I do not recommend those. There's a whole reason for it, but just not recommended. But there's nothing wrong with the stainless steel barrel. And just to kind of illustrate the point that we were just talking about there, this is a mid-length gas system. So as you can see, our gas block and our front sight block is a little bit further out. That's going to be cause it to cycle a little bit more smoothly, if you will, overall. And that's what I recommend. There's no reason for a civilian, again, non-military application, to be going with a carbine length gas system. So the perceived benefits of a stainless steel barrel is that people will say that they are a little bit more accurate, and that they are just a little bit better at corrosion resistance versus like a phosphate finish, which we have here. So a lot of barrels, like we talked about the chrome lining, if you have a chrome lined barrel, typically it's going to have a phosphate finish on there, which is this parkerized type of finish on there. Some folks say these are a little bit more corrosion resistant. Maybe, but that is why people go with stainless steel, the 410 stainless steel, or the 416 stainless steel. Another barrel material that you're going to see a lot here, and a lot, well, everywhere, is going to be a nitrided finish. So this particular one made by Stag is actually the same material. So both of these barrels are 4150 steel, but this barrel here on this rifle has a nitrided finish. So nitrided is a nitrocarburization process, which is a salt bath nitride in a lot of other industries is what you'll hear it called. And what it does, it gives you a nice black finish that you guys can see here, but it also gives you good corrosion resistance, good surface hardness, and good just durability and longevity overall. All of those are very good. So your chrome line barrels are good, your nitride barrels are good, your stainless steel barrels are good. I see no issues with them. Additionally, you'll see cold hammer forged barrels, which typically are chrome lined, but not always. Some of them are nitrided. It's just a different process they use to make it. So these are what's called button rifled. With a cold hammer forge, it's literally exactly how it sounds. They use a cold hammer forge to just pound it into shape. And cold hammer forged barrels, in a general sense, are going to be more durable in terms of round count. Now, most of you guys will never, ever, ever fire enough rounds for this to matter, but let's say all things are equal, which again, they never are. Let's say this barrel, which is button rifled, you could probably fire about, depending on your firing cycle, anywhere between 15 to 20,000 rounds through this before your groups or your accuracy would really start to degrade. That's under a normal firing cycle. If it was cold hammer forged, you could add another 15 to 20% to that in terms of durability. That's a general overview. That is a gross oversimplification, though. Trust me on that. I know some of the AR nerds are going nuts in the comments, and that's okay. But those are all systems I recommend. So they're all good. Some folks think the nitrided gives you a little bit better accuracy over a chrome lined, and I would say if this video was 20 years ago, I would agree with that. And the reason for that is just historically chrome lined barrels have had, because they're actually adding chrome to it, you have to undersize the bore or the center of the barrel and then add the chrome to it. And so as chrome line barrels were evolving, they had a reputation for not being quite as accurate as some of the other options because the chrome was inconsistent as it was added. Nowadays, that's absolutely not the case. 2023 and beyond, chrome line, I have chrome line barrels that shoot half MOA groups. Half MOA, for those who don't know what that means, MOA is just, let's say, an inch at 100 yards. So there are chrome line barrels that I own that if you guys watch my AR-15 build list, or playlist rather, you will see me shoot with the right ammo, right conditions, all that stuff, groups that are half inch at 100 yards. So I don't know about you, but are you that accurate? Probably not. So those barrels absolutely can shoot. Modern chrome line barrels, I don't really think you're giving anything up at accuracy or durability or corrosion resistance, but I would say that there's a chance that's true. What I would say is all of them are perfectly fine, perfectly reliable. The one I don't recommend that you're gonna see out there being offered up by a lot of budget companies is going to be a phosphate finish. So like we talked about here, this one has a phosphate finish, but it's also chrome lined. So there are some companies that will make essentially the same barrel like you see right here, and it will just be phosphated on the inside as well. So it has no interior lining that's going to make it more durable or more corrosion resistant. And it's not to say that, like, I actually have some of those guns and they work fine, but all things being equal, every other either material or treatment that I just talked about is better in some way. And if you're purchasing them as the consumer, you can I would only expect rather to see an increase of somewhere between $5 to $25 added onto the gun to have one of the other treatments that we talked about. And like I just said, the barrel and the bolt carrier group that we're going to get to here in a second are the heart and soul of your rifle. So adding the extra $5 to $25 over that finish, in my opinion, is simply 100% worth it. You're going to get better longevity with any of the different types that we just talked about. And you're going to get better surface hardness. You're going to get just better everything, corrosion resistance, all of those properties are all going to be better than just a 4150 or 4140. Those are just different types of steels with a phosphate finish. I don't recommend those. Again, I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm just saying spending the extra $5, worth it. So that is the actual materials that we're talking about there. And now in terms of, like we talked about, the MP testing or the high pressure testing. So again, that's a historic mil spec thing. And if you think about when the military was adopting the AR-15, when it was creating the mil spec, if you will, it was a long time ago, and manufacturing processes have gotten a lot better. So I still think that MP testing, the magnetic particle testing, is something that you want to look for in a barrel. If you can get it, it's a good thing. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't damage the rifle in any way. It doesn't excessively wear it in any way. And nowadays, a lot of folks who are knowledgeable would argue that the HP testing is not necessary and could cause too much wear on the barrel. I don't know that I would go that far. What I would say is that I feel perfectly comfortable with a barrel that is not HP tested, being fine, being modern manufacturing 2023. If it's not HP tested, for me, I don't care, that's fine. But I think the MP testing is still a good thing. Now, another important factor to talk about whenever we're talking about barrels is going to be the profile. So actually, let me leave this one up because it's a good example. So the profile of the barrel. So what I mean by that is the shape and the contour of it. So there's a lot of different barrels that you'll see out there. This one here, like I talked about, is a clone of the M4. So it's what's called the M4 barrel, where it has this cut, which enables military folks to add a grenade launcher to it. Most of you probably aren't going to be adding grenade launchers to your rifles. If you are, cool, then you're going to want to look for that cut, but most of you aren't. So what the government did with the history of the M16 is long, and but essentially they started out with a very narrow barrel, a pencil profile is what we call it, very lightweight profile, which was nice. Then there were some reasons they went to what was called a government profile or an A2 profile, and basically they added material out here on the end, which is stupid, and we'll talk about why here in a second. And they added that to the M16A2 and the M16A4. Both maintain that government profile, which added weight out on the end. And then when they went to the M4 profile, they took a little bit off for the grenade launcher, but still left it skinny under here, which was the original pencil profile. So the reason I say it's stupid is it's literally the exact opposite of what you want. So eventually they've come around now long term with these, the M4A1s, which are the current, mass adopted, mass issued rifles, which have what they call a SOCOM profile barrel, which is better in my opinion. But what you want ideally in a barrel profile, because this is where your chamber is, right? So this is where the round sits when you're about to fire, and when you shoot it, that's where all the hot gases, flames, smoke, all that stuff is concentrated. That's where all the heat is. So what you want is a thicker profile back here towards the rear, because that's where there's the most heat. And then you want a thinner profile out here at the end, because number one, there's less heat at the end, but additionally, if you think about how you hold a rifle when you're firing, everything, it's just geometry and physics, right? So the more weight you have out here at the end, the heavier it feels, versus if you have weight back here, in terms of how it feels when you're actually shooting it, in terms of the balance of the rifle, the pointability of the rifle, how heavy it feels, all those things, you want your weight back here. It balances much better. And out here, it literally does absolutely no good on the end. It makes no sense. It just adds weight where you don't want it and is dumb. But because the government has done that, and that was the mil spec standard, what's called the A2 or the government profile barrel is by far and away the most common in America. I'm hoping that with videos like this and many others that I've made over the years, that changes. And I think it is. There's a lot of companies that are going away from it. And in my opinion, most people, the vast majority of people watching this video, are going to benefit the most by either having a pencil profile barrel or a tapered barrel, meaning thicker back here and then tapered as it goes down. So the perceived con of a pencil profile barrel, do I have one on here? I don't. But the perceived con of a pencil profile barrel is that as it heats up, you'll lose accuracy. So I actually have a video on that. You can check it out where I show exactly what happens. And yes, you do lose some accuracy. But again, if you have the quality made materials, like we just talked about with the barrel steels and the right treatments done to it, you're gonna lose very, very little. And most of you will never fire 7 or 8 magazines, full magazines, and then need to fire a 1-inch group at 100 yards. Just think about how unrealistic of a standard that is for somebody who's not in the military, right? It's just highly, highly unlikely. So most folks will benefit from one of those two, either a contoured profile barrel, like for example, this one here is made by Stag, which is also shared the same parent company as Ballistic Advantage and Aero Precision and several others. But this is what's called a Hansen profile barrel, a little bit thicker back here, and then it just tapers all the way down. Something like this, there's absolutely no reason this shouldn't be something very similar, shouldn't be the standard in terms of what people are making. So the difference between this and a government profile is, in terms of weight, almost nothing. Actually, this is a little bit lighter. And the government profile just adds a bunch of weight, about 4 ounces rather. On a typical 16-inch barrel, you're gonna add about 4 ounces just by having that stupid government profile on the exact spot you don't want it, for literally no reason. I'm not sure if it'll come across here on camera, but you can see here, this is a government profile barrel. And I don't know if you guys can see the thickness difference there, but again, it's not doing you any good to have that extra thickness out there at the end. That said, is it a deal breaker in my opinion? No, it's not. But if you're talking about what you want and the ideals of selecting a barrel, again, a pencil profile barrel or a continuous taper, the advantage of the continuous taper, like we were just talking about there with that Stag Arms barrel, for example, or BCM. Actually, I have a BCM over here that has a similar profile. And the advantage of that is you get a little bit more rigidity. You will maintain, all things being equal, which they never are, you will maintain your accuracy for longer under extended strings of fire. That said, again, that almost never comes into play in the real world. So that is barrel specs, barrel profile, barrel twist. Let's talk about that. So your twist rate is how often the rifling makes a complete twist as it goes down the rifle, the length of the barrel rather. So as of right now, the mil spec is 1 in 7 twist, and I'm going to speak in complete generalities here when I say what I'm about to say. Just know that it's not always true. But generally speaking, with a 5.56 rifle or ammunition, like for example, in this magazine right now, I have 62 grain ammunition, which is on the lighter side for a 5.56. So 5.56 ammo is typically somewhere between 55 grain to 77 grain. So 62 grain, so a little bit on the lighter side. Typically speaking, the 1-in-7 twist barrels, which is a pretty fast twist. So the other ones that you'll see out there commonly in AR-15s, modern production ones, are going to be 1-in-7, 1-in-8, and 1-in-9. What I will tell you is that from a practical standpoint, the vast majority of you guys are going to be firing overwhelmingly 62 grain and 55 grain ammo, because those are the most common in America. For that, everything else being equal, which it never is, I'm going to keep saying that for some reason in this video because it's so true. I'm making broad generalizations. But everything else being equal, the 1-in-9 is generally speaking going to give you better accuracy with your 62 grain and your 55 grain bullets. But all of them will work just fine in the 1-in-7. It's not an issue to have a 1-in-7. But the 1-in-7s, generally speaking, for the heavier stuff like the 75 grain or the 77 grain or even some of the 80 grain rounds that are available out there, the 1-in-7 twist will, generally speaking, stabilize it because of the rate of spin that the barrel's putting on it. Stabilize those a little bit better. And if you're shooting out to 500 to 800 yards and you're looking for accuracy at that distance, then the 1-in-7 is definitely probably your friend, because you're going to be using those heavier bullets. Most of you guys are never going to shoot your AR-15 beyond 200 yards, so really it's kind of a moot point. Just know that, in my opinion, anywhere from 1-in-7 to 1-in-9, completely fine. I don't want to say never, but I would almost never make a decision on what rifle to get based on any of those three. All three of those are just fine, and people can argue about it all day long in the comment section, but it's absolutely true. So with that, we'll close out the barrel section of this video. The next part of the rifle we're going to go over is going to be your bolt carrier group. So what is the bolt carrier group? Well, it is this piece right here. So this is the piece that is going to cycle in your actual upper receiver and then into your buffer tube as the action cycles, as it goes back and forth. There's some main components to it. Basically, we have our bolt, which is this piece right here. We have our cam pin, which is this piece right here. We'll get into these here in a second. We have our gas key, which is this piece right here. And then we have our firing pin inside there. And then we have our carrier, which is the large piece that you see right here. So generally speaking, what do we want to look for on our bolt carrier group? Well, number one, in the entire bolt carrier group, the most important thing is going to be your bolt. So that is this piece right here. So the mil spec on this, which is what the military specifies. And the reason the mil spec is important, guys, is it is a standard that everything else can be judged by. It's not that it's the best thing, because it's not. Well, sometimes it is, but not always. But it's a baseline standard, and then if we're going to improve or degrade, you have a standard to measure that from, right? So the mil spec material on this, which has been used for 50 years plus now in the United States military, is that this is made out of Carpenter 158 grade steel. So you'll see that marked typically 158C is how you'll typically see it. And then that is just a certain type of steel that has been proven to be good at withstanding the forces that this bolt is going to undergo. Because basically, if you look inside your AR-15 barrel, there is what's called the star chamber. It looks just like this bolt, and the bolt goes in there, turns, locks into place, and then when the rifle fires, it unlocks and comes out. So there's a lot of stress on the different parts of this bolt. So you want a material that's going to be able to handle that type of stress. So historically, that has been 158 Carpenter steel. We also have our extractor right here, which is the part that hooks onto the round and then throws it out of the gun. Mil spec on there, we're rolling it in here on your screen, but there's a number of other types that have been used over the years. Additionally, there is different springs and O-rings and other things that go on the inside, little small parts that people argue about on the internet, which is fine. But that is the mil spec, if you will. This one here is a Bravo company from out of this rifle right here. Bravo Company USA bolt carrier group, in my opinion. Their Bravo Company bolt carrier groups are the standard, period. They're the standard that all else should be measured by. If you don't know anything and you want a really high quality bolt carrier group, get a Bravo Company. Just end the debate right there. They're very good, and if you watch, they actually have a video on their YouTube channel where they go over all the different quality controlled mechanisms that go into each one of their bolt carrier groups, and it's phenomenal. I mean, there are others that are just as good for sure, but in terms of better, I'm not sure you could actually be better. There are enhanced versions as well, which we'll probably talk about here in a second, but in terms of just a high quality bolt carrier group, Bravo Company, very, very good. Other good ones out there though, for sure. And the reason I was bringing that up is this one here is marked BCM HP MP. So just like the barrels, the exact same processes that we talked about. So high HP is that proof round, that high pressure round that they fire through it to stress the steel. And then the MP, or the magnetic particle inspecting, is that electronic signature being put at it to detect any type of cracks or weaknesses in the steel. So with a lot of manufacturers, the higher end ones, every single bolt itself will be tested in those ways. It'll be HP and MP tested. Just like we talked about with the barrels, there's a lot of people out there who are very well educated and will make the point that they don't believe with modern manufacturing you need the HP portion of it. Again, I would probably agree with that. You probably don't. Can it hurt it? That's a video for another day. So that is the material and that is the selection. Other materials that are perfectly good and I would absolutely never feel weird about or feel like I shouldn't be buying is 9310 steel. So that's going to cause an uproar in the comment section, which I understand. But the reason that's going to happen is back during, I believe, the early 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere in that time period, there was a run on AR-15s for political reasons. And basically, manufacturers couldn't make enough Carpenter 158 steel for all of the AR-15s that were in demand. And people have been saying literally for 40 years, at least that I can remember anyway, that 158 is not the best grade and that there are others that are better. The one that is very frequently cited is 9310 steel. And the reason for that is, again, all things being equal, which they never are. 9310 steel with the same heat treatments that this bolt goes through, the equivalent for that, which is obviously a little bit different because it's a different type of steel, but with the same quality of heat treatment on them, it's going to be about 7% stronger in terms of lifespan. It's just going to be a little bit more durable, a little bit stronger. And I agree with that. Now, the controversy came that when they first were bringing these 9310, you guys, if you read about it on the forums or the internet, you're going to see this. This is why I'm bringing it up. Is that when they were first coming out, what was happening is, again, during that initial rush where these became popular, they were treating 9310 bolts the same way they treated the 158 Carpenter bolts. And they were making them too brittle because the actual heat treatment for that steel is a little bit different. You engineers can talk about it down below in the comment section. But what that was causing was those 9310 bolts to break. And for forever since then, those bolts that were made in that period have been breaking. So if you ever hear reports of that, just check when the bolt was made, and I'd be willing to bet it was made in the early 2010s. Once kind of people figured out that this was a problem, all the manufacturers stopped and started doing it correctly. And since then, I mean, I don't even know how many, a lot, let's just put it that way, a lot of 9310 bolts, and I haven't had any issues with them. And I've had them, since that period. So the heat treating is good now, and 9310, if you're looking for a bolt, is perfectly fine in my opinion. So those are the two materials that you're looking for. Me personally would say that you want to have an MP tested bolt. If you can get it, why not? It doesn't hurt anything. And like I was talking about, Bravo Company does each one. There's a lot of companies that do batch testing, meaning they'll pull like 1 in 10 and MP test it just to make sure all the materials is good and consistent throughout. But if you can get individual, that's better in my opinion. So there is that. Additionally, firing pin, pretty standardized. There are some firing pins that have different lightning cuts in them to allow them to function in a little bit dirtier rifles, because as you can see, they get dirty. But nothing really to look for a firing pin. Cam pin, again, it's going to be mil spec. I think it's what, 4340. Believe me, you can go down a rabbit hole with cam pins, but just say that a standard mil spec one is fine. Let's go with that for the purposes of this video. Next up is going to be our carrier. So the carrier is made out of typically, pretty much every case I know of actually, 8620 steel. And the reason for that is that is the mil spec, and that when you see problems with bolt carrier groups, almost never is it with the actual carrier. It's with one of two parts. It's with our bolt or it's with our gas key. So the mil spec portion of this is going to have a phosphate finish, which is what we have here, and then a chrome wind portion here, which is where the actual bolt rides. So the bolt rides in here and goes back and forth as it cycles, unlocks, locks up, unlocks, locks up. And that chrome lining in there, what that does is it allows for just operations when it's dirty, dry, harsh conditions, etc. Additionally, the mil spec is for the gas key here to be chrome lined. And the reason for that, like we talked about earlier, is that gas is coming down this gas tube right here, which comes out of the barrel, and it goes right into this gas key. Like literally, this goes right over that tube in the cycle of the actual AR-15. And then the gas goes straight into here, and then everything happens after the gas comes in here. All the action starts moving. And the reason that's chrome lined is obviously it's getting a lot of hot, dirty gas in there, and the chrome helps in everything we just talked about: chrome resistance, heat resistance, all of those sorts of things. So that's why it's mil spec. And the actual staking on the screws here is very, very important on the gas key. So when you see problems with gas keys, it's almost always because of either it was poorly staked, or they used non-mil spec screws. So I'll roll in the screw specs here on the screen, but the staking is very, very important. So the reason they stake these the way they do is so that under the vibration of the rifle being carried, shot, etc., those screws don't start to back out. Because if those screws start to back out, two things happen. Obviously, this comes up and inside your upper receiver, that can cause the actual rifle to stop working, just that alone. And then additionally, if this wiggles, it might not be able to go over the gas tube when it goes back into battery, and then obviously you have a failure because your rifle is not going to cycle correctly. So that can cause issues. So the staking on these is very important. Now there's different ways that companies have staked these over the years. This is the way American companies typically do it, being even on both sides with the metal touching metal. You want the metal from the gas key to touch the actual screw. It's very important. That's what makes it work. And then additionally, there's companies like Colt Canada has made military rifles for a long, long time. They do them offset. And then there's companies like Ruger, Smith & Wesson, and other companies that do it with a hydraulic press, so they'll look square. My opinion is they all work fine, regardless of how you're doing it. The big thing is you want the metal from the gas key touching and pushing into the screws to prevent the screws from backing out. That's really what you're looking for there. And in terms of finishes, we already talked about that. This is the mil spec finish, if you will. Again, so Parkerized or phosphate with chrome lining, and then this is also phosphated on the bolt, and then so is the cam pin, and our firing pin is going to either be chromed or stainless. I've seen both work fine. And then the other, probably the second most popular that you're going to see out there on the market is nitrided. So just like the barrels we talked about earlier, it's a nitrocarburization, giving you good surface hardness, corrosion resistance, and it just also gives it lubricity, which in this application does matter. On a barrel, lubricity doesn't really matter, but in this application it does matter. Because that bolt carrier group, again, is riding inside of your rifle, and if it's nitrided, that additional lubricity can help once it gets dirty, dry, etc., or really hot. That said, the nitriding versus phosphate, the downside of nitriding in theory is that the nitriding isn't going to hold oil. So all firearms are designed to be lubricated. The nitriding, because it has that good lubricity and things just kind of slide off of it, oil, your gun oil can do that as well, whereas with your phosphate, it sort of holds the oil, if you will. That said, it's kind of offsetting, if you will, because the nitriding finish gives it better lubricity, which means it needs less oil, but it still needs to be oiled. But I think they sort of offset each other, and I would say that either one is perfectly fine. Like, I would never be like, oh, I would never trust my life to a bolt carrier group that's nitrided. Like, that's just not a thing. Now, the best finish, in my opinion, this is my opinion, and I'm sure it's not only mine, I'm sure it's shared by a lot of folks, is hard chrome. So hard chrome was the original AR-15 bolt carrier group finish, and it was changed for a number of reasons. You guys can watch this. They're called the stoner tapes on YouTube if you're bored in terms of why all that was changed. But I still think to this day, 2023, hard chrome is the best bolt carrier group finish. That said, like I just told you, I think BCM is the standard for quality, and they're not all hard chromed. So in no way would I be like, I need a hard chrome bolt carrier group to trust my life to it. It's absolutely not true. I'm just saying it's a very good one. So if you see one that is hard chromed, very, very good. The other ones that you'll see is typically some sort of TIN finish, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with those. They work, and a lot of you guys like different colors and stuff like that. If that's what you like, cool, have at it. The one I would say be careful about, and in no way am I saying it's bad, because it's not what I'm saying, is the nickel boron finishes. So nickel boron can be very good. It's a very shiny finish, and just like the nitride one that we talked about, it has good lubricity. And a lot of folks will say, oh, the oil or the carbon, which you see all over my hands here, wipes right off if you have a nickel boron finish, which it does. That's true. It's easier to clean them. That said, all of these are pretty easy to clean, and I wouldn't make a decision based on that personally. And the nickel boron, if done correctly, is a great finish. Just like we talked about earlier with the 9310 bolts, when they were first coming around, a lot of those were nickel boron at the time because that was the new hot finish back in those days. And a lot of companies weren't applying it correctly, and it was chipping off and flaking off, causing issues, as you can imagine. Now, in 2023, that's not really a problem. You don't really see that as an issue anymore, but the issue you still see sometimes with nickel boron, I've tested a lot. If I had to guess, I've probably tested 20 nickel boron bolt carrier groups in terms of headspace. So headspace is, well, we're not going to get into headspace for this video. Just if you're really interested in what headspace is, you can just look it up, but it's a safe space, I guess you could say, safe space, but it's a safe space that you want in your rifle, a safe distance that different parts are apart is the easiest way to say it for this video. But the thing with nickel boron is, just like we were talking about the old school application of chrome, how it can be inconsistent, the nickel boron can be as well. And what that can cause in our bolt in particular is a headspace issue with your rifle, which can cause just, I don't want to say unsafe because it's not really true, but it can cause just malfunctions is the easiest way to say it. And I would say that of what I've tested, probably 10% of them have had bad headspace just due to the actual nickel boron. Now, there's good ones, like there's really high quality companies that make good NIB nickel boron bolt carrier groups. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying just know that it is in 2023, based on my experience firing hundreds of guns and testing at least 20 for this very issue of headspace, it can be a thing with nickel boron. So just know that. But all of the finishes that I just talked about outside of nickel boron are good to go no matter what. Like, they're all good. Chrome, the mil-spec finish, the nitride finish, the TIN finishes, I don't see any issues with them. That said, I don't know if there's a huge advantage to those either, but the nickel boron can be great too. I have one, a Palmetto State Armory, which I believe is actually a Toolcraft produced one. I have one of those that's easily over 10,000 rounds, never had a single issue. So it absolutely can be a good bolt carrier group, but just know that it is something that you have to look out for if you're looking for one. So there is that. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because it is still common, is going to be your carrier profile. So this is mil-spec. So this is a mil-spec profile. And if you look at the back end here, you guys will see that they're different. So this one is from a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, which is a good rifle. There's nothing wrong with it, but this is the non-mil-spec version. It's a non-full auto, or you'll see it called semi-auto cut, and Colt made some other ones where they completely eliminated this for stupid reasons, particularly during the assault weapons ban, the 1994 to 2004 Clinton gun ban. And the reason I would recommend, if all things being equal, which they never are, is to get a mil-spec one, is because of the weight. So you get your what's called full auto profile. And so this system, again, if you really want to nerd out about this, watch the Stoner tapes, where Eugene Stoner, who's the man who invented the AR-15 primarily, goes over why the weight matters. But one of the big things is just timing. Like we were talking about with the mid-length barrel, it's a little bit softer. With this full auto profile, at the added weight of this in your carrier, it's a little bit softer as well. Obviously, it's designed so that way, as the name indicates, full auto, it trips a full auto sear. So it's capable of doing that, which this one isn't. And companies said, oh, well, we're gonna, not be held liable in a lawsuit if we don't put the full auto cut in there. So that's why a lot of them did it. A lot of them did it to comply with different state laws as well. But all things being equal, again, you want a full auto profile. There's no reason not to. It doesn't make your gun go full auto. It's just the reason it's called that profile is because it trips an auto sear if you have a select fire gun, which 99.9% of you don't. But I just wanted to bring that up because these are common. Like, you'll see a lot of companies make these. I'm not saying they're bad. Again, I'm just saying if it was this, it would be better, right? So that is something to look for as well with carriers. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for the bolt carrier group portion of this video as well. Guys, those are the main points of the rifle. Like I talked about, the heart and soul of it. If you guys want to see a part 2 of this, where we go into handguards, triggers, stocks, grips, all of those sorts of things, buffer systems, if you want videos on that, let me know. I can definitely make a part 2 for this, but just to make it consumable, we're going to stop it right there here on YouTube, with one exception. We're going to talk about muzzle devices here real quick. As we talked about at the beginning of the video, we talked about why do you want it, right? That's going to be the biggest factor driving your gear. Mission drives gear, right? So the overwhelming majority of folks out there are going to be very, very well served with an A2 birdcage flash hider. That's what it's typically called. That's what this one is here. You can see all the copper built up on it and corrosion, because this one's pretty heavily used. But the A2, what it does is it has a little bit of a filled in portion here versus the A1, which is open all the way around, and it does a good job at flash hiding. It gives you some compensation, i.e. meaning it prevents the muzzle from rising when you're shooting it. If you don't believe that, turn yours upside down and then fire it and see what happens, and you'll believe me. Just trust me on that. It does. But it's a good flash hider. These are very inexpensive. You can find these typically for $10 or less, and typically they come on most rifles. Most AR-15s in America, the vast majority of them come with these, and they're very, very good. And I would also add that for the vast majority of folks, if you're getting one that doesn't have that, or if you're looking to buy an aftermarket muzzle device, unless you are a competitive shooter, meaning shooting in 3-gun competition or something like that, there's absolutely no reason to get a muzzle brake or a compensator. Typically, most people, if you're a good shooter and have good fundamentals, that will actually overdrive the gun, meaning like we're talking about here, this will give you some compensation, meaning say you're shooting and it goes like that, which it doesn't, but let's pretend it does. So if you actually, a lot of the compensators and muzzle brakes out there, what they'll do is actually dip everything down if you're holding on and have a good purchase on the gun. Now there are exceptions to that. There's thousands of different designs out there, but what I would say is if you have a hard time handling recoil, and I mean this seriously, not as an insult at all, if you have a hard time handling the recoil of a mid-length barrel AR-15 with an A2 flash hider, I would definitely seek out training, because you should be able to handle it very, very easily. They're very soft shooting typically. And again, if you're looking to add a compensator on there and it's not for competition, the downsides of a compensator or a brake, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably because the industry does, much louder, much higher concussion. It's going to shoot a lot of gas out to the sides and up, which is also going to cause a lot of muzzle flash. All of those things are bad for all-around AR-15 use. They are very purpose-driven. Like if you're a competitive shooter, I am 100% fine with it. Cool, do your thing. But everybody else, you're probably going to want a flash hider. If your rifle came with an A2, you're probably going to want to stick with that, because it's a very, very good muzzle device for all-around type of use. And with that, we will close the video out. Again, as a reminder, over on Mug Club, we are going to be going over different price points and different recommendations. I have AR-15s all around me here that we will be recommending to folks at different price points, different uses, different applications that the AR-15 could be used for. So again, if you guys are interested in that, you can sign up for it at the website here. Code Mr. Guns and Gear will get you a free month. And everybody over there is funny besides me. So if you find this material dry, you're not alone. They are funny. I am not. But there's that. Additionally, if you like this type of video and you're not subscribed here, definitely subscribe. I have a feeling most of you guys are going to want a part 2 where we go into the different things like the upper receiver, lower receiver, all of those things that everybody likes to argue about on the internet. We can definitely walk you guys through what to look for those as well in a part 2, if that's what you guys want. If that's not what you want, that's cool too. And additionally, if you're new and you like the video, hit the subscribe button. If you have already hit the subscribe button, just double check, especially on YouTube. A lot of folks get unsubscribed. I hear that every single day. So double check that. Additionally, you can sign up for the email here on your screen. This email goes out once a month and it has all of the videos since the previous month's email. So that way there's no big tech giant censoring your eyes from my content. Of course, follow me on all my different social media where I share deals on all of these fine rifles, these fine accessories, these fine optics, this fine ammo. I share them across my social media, particularly on the non-Zuckerberg platforms. It's where I share the most because I have the most freedom to do so. And then additionally, you can sign up for my daily deals email. It goes out every single day, as the name indicates, and it has 8 these days. It changes, but right now it's 8 of the best deals that I find around the internet. It's in that email. It's the cheapest for that part I know of anywhere on the internet. So that way it saves you guys some time because I've already done the price comparisons for you, and hopefully it saves you some money as well. Also has a pretty good meme in there. A lot of folks really like the memes. So that is it, guys. Thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate it. Again, we're going to head over to Mug Club, answer some of those questions from the Mug Club chat, and get into the rifles. So with that, piss off, YouTube.